So, Laura, thank you very much again for visiting us. It's just a fantastic talk, but it brings the question, why Multicore World?
Well, it's just such a nice venue. The people who come are very smart, as you've mentioned, and the conversations are great. And it's also a very relaxed atmosphere. So that's why. And Wellington is wonderful as well, of course.
Well, even if we decide to do it somewhere else, it's still New Zealand, which is a little
Still
bit
New
far
Zealand.
away.
New Zealand is wonderful in general, despite the earthquakes.
And the cyclones and other minor things. Laura, I'm really interested on your work, and I encourage all the audience to look at the papers. But the reason why I invited you is because I'm interested on a long-term project about, I call it agriculture empowered by supercomputing. And the big challenge is how we define things at low level. As I presented in my talk at the very beginning, I'm in a project called Agriculture Empowered by Supercomputing, and the whole idea, I'm not sure if building digital twins, but the idea is to improve the quality of life of people in New Zealand. But in order to build a model, I started to think on terms of which are the foundations, the mathematical foundations, the topology, and that brought me to the ideas of metrics. And that, in some way, in my entrepreneurial hunch, aligns with what are you starting to look. Is Euclidean or not? But you are only researching towards established supercomputers can be applied to distributed heterogeneous computing in the long term, at least catchment scale or nationwide scale.
So, okay, so there's actually a couple of questions there. One is just the networking, and that's it's sort of tailored to, what you're trying to do. We're aiming at optical, but, it's good for a large-scale supercomputing device if you need lots of bandwidth. The second question is metrics, and we discussed that a little bit during the panel. And what's so interesting is you can have different measures of distance for the same object, and it makes a difference in how you understand it. So, and it also makes a difference in how you can explain it. Like if we're talking about metrics in 3 space, everybody knows what it is to walk around or fly in an airplane or whatever. So that's very clear. But you might not be talking about that kind of distance. You might be talking about Hamming distance, for example, how many bits have flipped. And so it really depends on what you're addressing. And especially in the field of information visualization, it's an abstract space, which I think you would be doing a lot of, right,
Yes.
for agriculture. And it's an abstract space. It's not just, here's the field and, here's the temperatures. That's just regular 3 space. But you're looking at graphs, and that has a whole different distance. So it's very important to consider those things.
And I'm thinking how in the past certain companies dedicated to GIS, or they just started by defining a distance. I mean,
Yeah.
the major companies, they started with a single idea and they built over decades of that. Now you have a decade ahead of you for research. Where are you going in terms of applications?
You're
I
talking
know that's a hard question for a researcher.
Yeah, it is really a hard question. I mean, so the lab I work for does fluid dynamics simulations, and that's of interest. But I'm also interested in just numbers themselves and graphs, as you gathered. I'm interested in graphs, and so I guess my thought would be I would really like to apply mathematical rigor to the field of computer science much more. It's like, I've said this a bunch of times to people in the past, in the 50s, math and computer science were very close. And these days, everybody, all computer scientists are literate in math, certainly, and can follow math, but they have a different approach. And I think math has something to bring to the table. And also, they bring something different. Computer scientists bring something that mathematicians don't have. So I think it's a really great convergence there. And
This converge actually exists or has been diverging in the past few decades? I'm speaking from the point of view of a calculus lecturer or even as a math teacher from decades ago, and I remember that I just used to teach pure geometry from the Greeks, and that had much better how can I say, educational impact in long term rather than some tools which can be optimized and automated. Now the open question is, how do we look what can happen in the future? And that's why I'm interested on, are we moving from Euclidean geometries, or should we look, I mean, I always remember studying Lobachevsky.
I think that depends on what you're actually doing. Like if you're just there's a number of different geometries, and you can visualize them in different ways and do different things with them, and it depends on what you want to do.
Yeah.
Basically, like for example, okay, so you'll laugh. You liked hyperbolic geometry. I used to do computer graphics and visualization, and I always thought hyperbolic geometry would make a great computer game, because things look like they're far away, and all of a sudden, whack, they're in your face, and then you've got to react to that, So there's just different things you could do with it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for having you, and look forward to having you back.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure.